Hey y'all, I am back in the kitchen and today I'm going to show you how to make a tomato pie. Now listen, if you've never had a tomato pie, don't feel bad because I was introduced to them late in life. Trust me, I had never heard of a tomato pie. Usually when you speak of a pie, unless you're talking about chicken pie, well then it's a fruit pie that is sweet, like a cherry pie or a blueberry, whatever. But my friend Sarah, she had this pie when she went down to Atlanta to a place called Mary Mac's Tea Room. And she came home and she said, "Oh my goodness, Jamie, they have something called a tomato pie and it will blow your mind." And I thought, "Oh, I'll play your silly game. I like to get my mind blown. So what is it?" And she told me. And then I looked up a recipe for it online and I thought, "My God, that doesn't sound very good." It was full of mayonnaise and cheese, and I just have this thing about hot mayonnaise. I can't do it, but I understand that it is necessary in some preparations to have a little mayonnaise, and you got to cook it. So I just had to get over that. But I just I made the recipe from the traditional standard point of view, and then I had to tweak it, and of course I had to make it my own because that's how I roll. So I'm going to show you today how I make a tomato pie, and it's a perfect thing for you if you want to serve dinner. You could use this as a side dish, or if you were having brunch, you could make this as one of your entrees. Or if you just wanted a tomato pie, well, then you could make this. Now, I did make my own crust, and there's nothing wrong with using store-bought crust. So, just let you know that I did make a crust. But I'm going to start out talking about my tomatoes. Now, look, this plate of tomatoes is gorgeous. Hello. Now, Brad, my husband Brad, he grows tomatoes. Downstairs, we got a little garden plot out back, and he grew, I think, one of the Rutgers, and I don't know, some of these pear tomatoes, little Tommy Toes. But my friend Beth, she is quite a farmer, and I went to her house, and she just had tomatoes galore. She has Cherokee Purple. She has little Mr. Stripey's. She's got something called a tie-dyed tomato. She has all kinds of grape tomatoes and tomatoes, and she's just every dang tomato you could possibly think of. Well, she told me that I could have whatever I wanted, and I thought, well, you're all right. So I gathered up a bunch of different tomatoes and I brought them home with me, and I have cut them up already. Now, this pie requires a little thought, a little prep time, because I let these sit overnight. Because tomatoes, as a rule, are little balls of water. They've got so much water in them. And for my pie, while tomato is the main ingredient, I didn't want all that water in my pie because, well, it's going to make it soupy and gushy when we cook it. And I don't want that. So you have to work with it and deal with it and come up with a solution. So what you do, you take these tomatoes and you slice them. Now I have sliced these probably about a quarter of an inch, nothing crazy. And I laid them out on a big old piece of paper towel. And I took my salt shaker, well, I took my salt cellar, it's kosher salt, and I sprinkled the food out of them with a good dose of salt because salt leaches water from whatever you're working with. And I knew that if I put the salt on there, that the tomatoes were going to start releasing their water, and then I'd be able to soak it up and sop it off of them, and that's what I wanted to do. So that's what I did. And I took another piece of paper towel and I blotted it off after I had let it sit about 30 minutes with that salt on. And I got a lot of water out of those tomatoes. I could wring it out and the water would just flow out of it. I put them on this plate and then I put them in the refrigerator overnight because I knew that I wanted to do the video today instead of yesterday. So I want you to know when I pulled this out of the refrigerator earlier, it was just standing in water. So that salt continued to work all through the night. I tipped this up on its side and water just gooshed out. I bet I got another cup of water out of these things. So these tomatoes have definitely leached out over half of the water that was in them initially. And so that's good. That just means our pie is not going to be a soggy mess and we won't have a soggy bottom. And I think it's just going to be perfect. So, ta-da! My story. So that's the story with the tomatoes. Now, this crust that I have created it's called a short crust because I got a little lazy. I didn't want to grate the frozen butter into the flour and make the gravel and then add the water and make a pie crust. I just melted some butter and took some milk and I poured it in my plain all-purpose flour, added just a little bit of salt and mixed it up. Then I rolled it out and then I put it in this tart pan. Now, if you've never worked with a tart pan before, tart pans are 2 pieces. See, I'm going to show you. This just pops out. I have blind baked this crust, so that's why I can handle it like this. But you see the bottom piece of pie? And it just sits down in this little frame. And that's what I wanted, because otherwise it'd be hard to get the pie off of a regular pie tin. And I wanted to be able to serve it without a pie plate around it. Does that make sense? Anyway, so I made my pie crust, and then I rolled it out, and then I laid it on this, and I pieced it down in there, and then I put my piece of parchment paper, I laid it on top, and then I filled it full of dried pinto beans. That's what I use as my weight to hold it down because we want to blind bake it. If you don't blind bake a pie crust that you need to cook a little bit before you put a filling in, then it bubbles up and makes big old puffy pockets, and well, you don't want that. So that's why we weight it down, and it keeps it nice and flat, and it starts to bake a little bit. Now, this isn't baked all the way, but it is baked for the most part. It just needs to really brown up. It'll brown on the bottom, but it's not going to brown on this top part, just because we're going to put liquids and cream cheese and stuff on it. So it's fine. It tastes good. I tasted a piece of it, so I'm in the clear. So I'm going to set this to the side. I have got my oven preheated to 350 degrees. And I'm going to get busy with my filling. Now, I come up with this. I didn't use a recipe that I found anywhere. I come up with this recipe on my own because, like I said, I wasn't that keen on using like 2 cups of mayonnaise. I just couldn't do it. So I have a block of cream cheese. Now I'm not going to use this whole block because we just don't need it. We don't want to fill our pie tart with a bunch of filling. We're going to use our pie tart for our tomatoes. But we do want a little ooey gooey yummy at the bottom. And so that's what we're doing with this. So open up the cream cheese. I'm going to cut this block in half. Just like that. And I'm going to put half of him in my little trusty bowl here. Boom, see? Throw him in. And get all of him, because we don't want to leave any. Woohoo! Alright, so I set this to the side. Pretty much done with him. And then I want to crack an egg in him. This came from my friend Beth's house, of course. Farm fresh eggs. See, it was nice and blue, kind of green. I love that. And wipe my fingers off. Get me a proper utensil here. And I am going to use some mayonnaise. I'm not going to use 2 cups of mayonnaise though. I'm going to use a big heaping tablespoon. So it might even be maybe a tablespoon and a half. Going in with that much, maybe just a little more. You just eyeball it. You can't hurt a thing as long as you don't use 2 cups. So tablespoon and a half to 2 tablespoons. Whatever. I'm going in with a little bit of black pepper. Just sprinkle. You know, it could be a 1/4 teaspoon, whatever. I am going in with a sprinkle of salt here. So there's a pinch. There's another pinch. I want it to have some good flavor because what goes well with tomatoes? Garlic. I don't want to use fresh garlic because fresh garlic sometimes has a tendency to be a little harsh. So I'm just going in with my granulated garlic. I ain't gonna measure that. So I want a teaspoon, not quite a teaspoon, it's shy of a full teaspoon of garlic powder. And put my lid back on. And I'm going to break that in just a little bit here and start mixing that egg and the cream cheese together. And it'll come together here in a minute. Just kind of goosh it around. I did let my cream cheese sit out for several hours so that it would get nice and room temperature, because that makes it easier to work with. Now, it's kind of still goopy and there's hunks, but that's good. I don't care. This is a bowl of cheese. It is a mixture. I've got some Parmesan here that I use on a fine grater. And then I've got a little bit of real sharp cheddar cheese here. And then this is Monterey Jack cheese. And I think all total, if you were to pack it in a cup, it might be 1 full cup of cheese. But it's kind of fluffy. And, you know, I just eyeballed it. I knew about how much I wanted. So I'm just going to pour all that cheese into this bowl. And he fell out, so we got to put him back in. So now I'm just going to stir this up. And it comes together just lovely. And you're thinking, what in the world are you going to do with that? Well, we're just going to do what we got to do with it. We're going to spread it in the bottom of our pie crust. And like I said, you might not think that there's enough, but we just want it to line the bottom. We don't want it to be a big, thick, goopy mess of it. So I do want to put some herbs in. I went out on my back deck and I picked me just this little handful of basil. I went out front to the flower bed and I got me a little bunch of oregano, and I picked just a few little pieces of thyme, and now I've got my parsley. So you might have a teaspoon and a teaspoon and maybe a tablespoon of parsley, but I'm just going to give this a nice little rough chop. And then I'm going to add this to my filling because, like I said, I am a big fan of fresh herbs, and I love that bright pop that it gives. So you can stand there and watch me cut up these herbs for a minute. If you want to put them in the food processor, by all means, do that. But I do pretty good with my trusty knife, as long as you don't cut your finger off. Wouldn't that be a travesty? And I'm a maniac with this knife, so. But, you know, I haven't killed anybody yet, and I haven't cut my finger off, so I'm doing all right. All right, so this is just a good rough chop. You can see there's still a few pieces that could use another little hit, so I'll just hit them here at the end. Scrape it off, and this is going straight into my cheese bowl. Boom, boom, boom. Perfect. Now I'm just going to mix it up. And this is going to taste amazing. I know y'all think I'm over the top sometimes when I'm explaining things or when I tell you how much I like something. But if I like something, game on. I'm going to talk about it. So, here we go. This is exactly the consistency that I was looking for. You can see all the herbs in there. You can see the pieces of the cheddar and the jack cheese. And the cream cheese has completely coated pretty much everything. And that's wonderful. So I'm going to move my trusty little pie crust over. And I'm going to line him with this cheese mixture. Boom. Okay. Now I'm going to get a smaller little offset knife. It's just a little easier to work with when I'm lining this and spreading this out. If you don't have one, that's all right. Just do the best you can. So, I ain't gonna lie, y'all, tomato season's my favorite because I love a tomato. And I love especially when you can grow a tomato and one slice will fit on a piece of bread. Rock on. my favorite. And I have to tell you, Brad has grown some pretty amazing tomatoes. I'm going to show you. Look at this. We had this at lunchtime. He grew this tomato. It was a one slice wonder. It covered the whole piece of bread. So I was happy at lunchtime. Look, it's so beautiful. And it tasted just like heaven. I'm telling you, a good tomato is hard to beat. Hard to beat. Anyway, okay, back to the pie. So I'm just spreading this out. Kind of, as even as I can get it, I guess. I'm not much of a stickler for such, but we don't want it to, be totally uneven. We want everybody to have a perfect bite. So this is lined. It looks pretty good, I think. I've still got plenty of depth available to lay my tomatoes in. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go at this with these tomatoes. Move my little bowl over here. Now, I'm going to take some of these big ones. These are the Cherokee purples. And they're just gorgeous tomatoes. And just kind of fill them out like this. We'll go in with whatever that one happens to be. There we go. And it's just kind of willy-nilly. I mean, there's really not a method to my madness here. We're just getting these put in place, covering up the cheese, and we're just building a pie. We're building a pie. And, I mean, if you can be artistic about it, then by all means, use your artistic ability and jazz it up. But for me, I can draw a stick, man. That's about as artistic as I get. Bless my heart. But I do other things better, so. See, it's just willy-nilly. I'm just lining these tomatoes up. I might not end up using all of them. We'll see here in a minute if I am going to use them all. Then we'll go at it with some of these pretty little yellow pear tomatoes, I think is what they're called. Now, the ones that we've got downstairs, we've got just cherry tomatoes, and we've got a couple of grape tomatoes. I love the grape tomatoes. They're nice and sweet. Just the right amount of acid. I hate tomatoes in winter because, well, they're terrible. Oh, hothouse tomatoes. Somebody's growing them and making a living on them, and God bless them, but they taste yuck. So we just don't have tomatoes in winter. If we're having a salad in wintertime, you won't find a tomato in there. Nor do we have a BLT in the wintertime because it's just disappointing all around. Okay, look, y'all. This is just the butt piece. I should have thrown him out. I'm going to move this to the side. Now look, isn't that just lovely? But you know what's going to make it even a little more lovely? A little bit of onion. I grew these onions. They're not much to look at. Listen, I planted them, and they were about a fourth that size. I don't know why my onions didn't grow, but this is what they look like when I pulled them out of the dirt. I thought, well, it is what it is. So I'm still going to use them, and they are good. They're nice and sweet. They're not harsh like sometimes the onion has a tendency to be. So I'm just going to cut these in pretty little slices, little half moons. And I'm going to just throw a few of them on top of my tomato pie. Because, well, why wouldn't I? Look, I'm not even necessarily going to rip them all apart. I'm just going to put them on here whole. If I had a Vidalia, I would have used that. Because I do love a Vidalia onion. But, yeah, whatever. Use what you got. And that's what I had. Now, this is a new addition to it. If you're not familiar with a caper, let me introduce you to my little friend. These things are good, y'all. All it is a brined flower petal shoot or something. It's not a petal, excuse me. It's not a flower petal. But it is the shoot of some kind of flower. It's like a blossom before it blooms. And they're tasty. They're in a very strong saltwater brine. I like them, and you don't need many. I'm just going to take a few of these. I'm just going to put them in a few little crevices here, just sprinkle them around. They just really give a nice flavor to things. And if I'm making I don't know, some kind of a marinara or a puttanesca sauce for some pasta, I love to put my capers in. So, I'm get my pepper shaker out because, you know, it looks nice with a little pepper on top. Give her a little sprinkle. Now, if you were of a mind to put some more cheese on top, knock yourself out. Go ahead. You can put a little Parmesan on top. You can, you know, I wouldn't put another heavy cheese on top because, well, you're defeating the purpose because this is the star of the show, the tomato, not the cheese. So let me get a pan and I'm going to set this tart pan down inside this other pan because even though I leached a lot of the water out of these, there's still a considerable amount and it might bubble over. So this is going into a 350 degree oven. I am going to set my timer for 30 minutes. I'm going to keep an eye on my crust around the edge. If it starts to brown too much, then I'm going to cover it with a piece of tin foil. I'm going to let it keep cooking because I want this to completely cook in the oven. More of that liquid needs to evaporate off so these tomatoes can bind together and that bottom's going to be delightful when that cream cheese melts. So shut the front door. This is going to be great. I'm going to put it in the oven. I'm going to come back, and when y'all do come back, it's going to be done and I'm going to cut it and it's going to be amazing. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, y'all, the timer just went off on this pie and it looks good. Let's pull her out here, see what we got. Well, look at that. Everything has kind of toasted up. That looks nice. Cut that off. The outside has browned up just a little bit. Now, I still see these tomatoes, y'all, are still so full of water. You would think they would be completely dehydrated, but they're not. But I'm not ready to cut into it yet. I'm going to let it sit a little while. And when I come back, then we'll cut it. Oh, it smells good. Okay, I've let it sit a few minutes. It's not cool by any means, but it has cooled down a little bit so that we can at least handle it without getting completely scalded. Now listen, the nature of the beast when you're working with a tart pan, you just have to feel your way with it because we want to get it out of this, but they don't really tell you how to do it. So I just had to come up with something. So this is my attempt to get this thing out. And I just have to transfer it for a second over here. I'm going to put it on my little pie stand. Not my pie plate, it's a pie stand. I take a little bowl. I just turn him upside down like that. And then I go back and I get my tart pan. And I grab just the edges of it because you know it's 2 pieces. And I stick this, let it sit. And hopefully this outer thing is going to just pop right off. We'll see. Maybe I'm not holding my mouth right. Come on. Go at it, just a little bit of pressure here on the side to get this crust just to release. And hot dog! Look at that. It came right off. Now, I don't have the fingers for this, so let me grab my pizza gadget. Ta-da! This is how I'm going to work it. I'm going to stick this little booger up under that crust. And I'm going to transfer it over to my pie stand. I don't have a plate that's big enough to hold that monster. So I just put it like this. And let me set this to the side. so that we can marvel at how beautiful this creation is. Look at that pie, y'all. A few places got just a little bit browned. I'm not saying burned. They're a little brown. Shoot, that's fine. I like a little crunch. Why not? But you see how pretty it is? I mean, it just screams summertime. Now, I know that when I go to cut into this, it's going to leach a little water out. And it's just the way it's going to be because I'm not letting it set up completely. If I let it set for like an hour, it would pretty much close up. Everything would be nice and firm. And then I could cut it with no problem. But I ain't waiting an hour to cut into this. I'm just going to go at it while it's still pretty hot. Because I want you to see what it looks like when we serve it. So, here goes. I'm just going to cut into it. I got that crust pretty thick in places. That's why she's not wanting to give. Here we go. Here we go. What am I playing? I'm taking the rest of my little tomatoes that I left because I'm not going to leave them. I'll move that just to the side. Now, when you go to serve this, you could take a little block of Parmesan, and if it still was warm, you could just kind of grate a little Parmesan on top like that. Or you could even serve it with, well, I know some folks are big condiment people. Me. If you wanted to serve it with a little side of ranch dressing or something, just as a little drizzle, whatever, I think that sounds lovely. But I'm going to cut into this sucker and see what we got. Probably going to get a 3rd-degree burn in my mouth, but you're worth it. I'm going to do it just for you. Here goes. Ooh-wee. Y'all, seriously. It's so good. The flavor of that tomato has just intensified. Shut up. It's good, y'all. You saw it wasn't hard to make. And like I said, if you didn't want to go to the trouble of making a crust, you can use a store-bought pie crust. But these little tomatoes, they cook up so nice and sweet. Golly gee. And that little bit of cream cheese and the Monterey Jack and the cheddar in the bottom. Winner, winner, tomato pie dinner. You're going to like this. I hope you give it a try. And if you do try to make it, I want you to let me know how it goes. Here I am begging y'all to let me know what you think and how it looks when you make it. Very rarely does anyone ever reply to me. I'm starting to get a complex. So make this pie, y'all. Let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear from you. I will post the recipe for the crust as well as the filling, the whole 9 yards, over at JamieTeachMeToCook.com. And I've got lots of interesting things happening. You will be, if you don't follow my Facebook page and if you don't follow JamieTeachMeToCook.com, you might be surprised to learn that I'm starting a business. And if you're at all interested, you can read all about it over at JamieTeachMeToCook.com. Just go to the shop option in the little toolbar on my website and you can see what I'm up to. But until then, I'm going to eat this piece of pie. And I'm going to wish y'all a happy day. Bye, y'all.